to this afternoon's session. And so my name's Frances, and here's Jyoti here as well, sitting in the front row. She'll be talking a little bit later in the week. But both Jyoti and I are part of a research centre called METFORTECH, which is made up of a consortium of researchers from the universities whose logos are very nicely and politically correctly, hopefully listed at the bottom of this slide. And I thought what would be interesting here, since circular economy is one of our themes, but there's a good smattering of geologists and people who deal with resources, is to talk about the way that we are looking from the front, as I've called it, of the circular economy. And hopefully in 30 minutes or so time, you'll know something about what I'm trying to get at on that topic. So this is a project funded from the United Kingdom then, and it came out of the climate challenge. So we always think about energy as being the big problem in climate, but if you take this view, in the UK anyway, 55% of the total current emissions are from the energy generation, and 45%, so pretty much half, from the products that we use. So stuff, things, materials are a really important point in our journey to net zero. So this program, which is called NICER, Interdisciplinary Circular Economy Research, was funded very much with the support of our Environment Government Department in the UK. And they put in £30 million. I don't know if that sounds a lot. To us in the UK, that's a lot of money. It's quite a big program, with 5 different centres and a coordinating hub, and each centre concentrates on a particular flow of materials. So there's one doing textiles, one doing iron and aluminium, one doing construction materials, one doing organic chemicals, and us in METFORTECH, we're doing what we call technology metals, or you could interchange that for critical metals if you wanted to. Our aim is to make our critical metals not critical anymore, so we decided to call it technology. So these technology metals are the things that I heard Gavin yesterday call the spice metals, the things that we need, not necessarily in big quantities at all, in fact normally in tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of tons a year for the whole world's supply, but without things like lithium and cobalt and rare earths, tellurium, selenium, platinum group metals, these kind of things in that list there are clean technologies, are digital technologies, simply won't work. So these are very much part of the stuff then that we use. And to get to net zero, we have to get much cleverer and use less of these and lower the carbon demand and footprint that goes with these materials. But for our technology metals, there's the different imperative too, that we heard about quite a lot yesterday, that we actually need lots more of these coming into our economy. 10 times as much lithium will have to be produced if we want to use lithium storage batteries in electric cars and for all the other energy storage applications. So we need to have a lot more, but we need to get much cleverer and do more without using too much more, is really the theme of our centre. So unlike any of the other 4 centres in the NICER programme, we have a theme 2 in here looking at raw materials. So over the 4 years of our centre, what we're going to do is produce a new roadmap, so a way and a timeline that we can have a completely new technology metal circular economy system with new production in sustainable ways, and clever design for recycling, and all the best business models to keep things at high value in the circular economy. And we're going to propose how the UK could do that. And for us, as I say, we have to go right to the front of the circular economy, as I want to call it, and look at raw materials. And so in this theme here, I'm going to look at the ways you can apply circular economy to raw materials, and then kind of look at how that then can also be applied to the flows through the economy. In order to do this successfully, you need a really, really multidisciplinary and multidisciplinary team, I'd like to say, and interdisciplinary working. So I think that suits this workshop very well, because this is a fantastic group of multidisciplines all here this week to work in an interdisciplinary way. And this project, then you can see, and if you're designing a research proposal, you can see how many people are taking part. We've got 21 co-investigators, that's the academics, with 9 postdocs and PhD students, et cetera, and 38, actually it's more than that now, it's getting on for 45 companies who are working alongside what we're doing. So if you want to go big, this is a kind of example of quite a big research project that you might design by Friday. So really, we have to get working properly, interdisciplinary working then. And that means lots of different sorts of people. And here we are. And maybe I'm going to leave this slide up for just a little minute or so and see if you can identify people on there. There's geologists on there. There's somebody from the business school. I think he's quite easy to find. Who's found the geos? Yeah, I bet you can find the geos. There's a geomicrobiologist all ready to go in the lab, I can see there, and maybe some of the other people a little bit harder to track down. I don't know how many you can identify there out of those pictures, but that's quite a fair number of our Met4Tech team. I have to say it's really nice that we have actually each month we have what's called a researcher conversation, where somebody does a talk and we actually try and listen to what they're saying and learn to speak each other's language, between whether you're a life cycle assessment specialist or a chemist in the laboratory with deep eutectic solvents and all these things that people are doing. So, there we are. Okay. And I guess that's what you're probably already getting very good at this week, is talking to people from completely different backgrounds. Right, so that's Met4Tech then. And now back to the view from the front point of view. And here's the Ellen MacArthur butterfly that Edmund introduced you to yesterday, if you haven't come across it before. And you see the wings on the butterfly. We're mainly in the blue wing, which is on your right, which is the materials one. And the aim of the butterfly is that once you've got things in here, you hold them at highest value. And when I say circular economy to people, it's almost 100% that they assume that I'm going to be an expert on recycling. So often, circular economy, that's recycling. And people assume it's like collecting up waste, especially e-waste, or clever ideas to recycle fashion and things like that, and go and repurpose things and reuse things. And sure, but that's the back of the circular economy, hey? You're only doing this loop of last resort in recycling, because the rest of it hasn't worked as well as it might do. And so the front of the circular economy is often marooned off the side or off the top of these diagrams, or doesn't appear together at all when people do these virtuous green circles of circular economy, completely excluding and think that they're working towards, in the future, no input from mining ever at all, ever again, something to be got rid of if possible. And so I want to show you some of the ways that we can apply then circular economy principles to this and try and get us much better integrated into the circular economy. Okay. And so, as Edmund also introduced yesterday, I'm going to think about 3 very simple principles that Ellen MacArthur put forward to communicate with people about circular economy. And so that's designing out waste and pollution, keeping products and materials in use, and regenerating natural systems. So you'll see those 3 statements come up, not necessarily in that order, but on the slides that are coming up now. So watch out for those 3 things. Okay. Right, so then circular economy from the front can start for us geologists right at the very beginning, before you ever go out in the field on a new exploration project. You can be thinking about how you're going to design out waste and pollution by the kind of ore that you're going to look at and how you're eventually going to produce that. And so what we might call geometallology, or common sense if you're a geologist looking for economic ores, guys, that is part of the circular economy. We are already in it. And so this is something often is maybe economic geologists doing our academic work, we're really interested in how deposits formed, how we're going to create a mineral system model of this deposit. But remember, we also have to think very carefully right from the beginning about how are we actually going to mine and extract from that deposit. What's the grade of the ore? We're hearing about, was it 0.2% copper deposits yesterday? Well, okay, that's an awful lot of rock you're going to need to move. Where are the high-grade deposits? Is it a composition we can actually process or not? Okay, is it really deep or not? Is it easy? Where in the world is it? Is it close to infrastructure? All these kinds of things that you're thinking about already, these and often convert through geometallology into the environmental footprint, which is in yellow here, of mining and processing. And when you're working with that, trying to do it as well as possible, designing out waste and pollution, certainly I think that is a circular economy approach. And I put in some rocks here because I know there's some not geologists, so I thought I'd indulge myself in some of my favorite rocks, which are rare earth rich rocks. And here's 4 pictures, right? And some little statements, which if you're a geologist, you can read those very quickly. And the point I want to make is that when you're thinking about what to go and look for, what to explore for, different types of rocks have really different characteristics when they're mined and processed. So a mineral sand on here, this is really like a beach sand. It really is, often sand you can rub in your fingers, it'll fall apart. So you can imagine that's actually very low energy to mine, quite simple to process because the grains are often will fall apart easily. And I think a lot of the world's rare earths would come straight out of those mineral sand deposits if it wasn't for the little red point down at the bottom, that the mineral in their monazite is actually quite radioactive. So it's an environmental problem there. And so if you look at this pretty one here, so they win the Pretty Rocks Prize. They have some really interesting rare earth, heavier rare earths in them, very nice. They tend to be lower grade, so you need to dig a pretty big hole in the ground. And the mineralogy is so nice and pretty that it's actually very complex and creates lots of processing problems. So there are different challenges with these kind of ore deposits and working out which is going to produce the lowest waste, the most environmental characteristics that you want is part of circular economy approaches to exploration and mining. And when we try and make new geomodels now for use in exploration, we'd go from these kind of the older sketches and things. Now we produce things like these 3D PDFs as our models. And we're trying to incorporate some things like showing on this model itself is a pop-up I've pulled out here. I know it's a bit small for you to see from the lecture theatre here, but to try and find what are the grades and tonnages, which minerals can we process easily. So if you're a geologist new to alkaline rocks, you're just about to go and explore, you can already start to think about some of the environmental characteristics of this deposit, even if you only ever look at one cross-section of the deposit. So to try and get these right in to every way that we describe a deposit. Okay, so that's one view. Now let me move on to a slightly different topic that I've heard a term used a couple of times this week already, and that's one of life cycle assessment. If you're going to do circular economy, you'll very quickly come across the idea of trying to measure quantitatively the impacts of doing an activity, which might be the whole life cycle of a car, manufacturing, using, scrapping, or it could be an actual mining activity. So you define your goal and your scope. So on this one here, what we're doing is applying life cycle assessment to a mining operation. We're looking at all the inputs, it's like the energy, water, materials, land use, putting that into specialist LCA software. And if the inventory is good, if it's correct, garbage in, garbage out, obviously, but correct in, then you'll get some good quantitative figures about the global warming potential of what you're doing, the land use, the pollution potential, resource depletion, and other things that people look at. So I think this is now becoming essential because we know that our colleagues in manufacturing, if you're making a car, when things are being used, everybody's doing LCA, and we need to get into LCA as well, looking at the front of the circular economy here. And then you come up with things like this. This is a publication from 2014 looking at producing rare earths. And it isn't the crushing and grinding on the mine site, this mantra that we have in mining, that's the big villain, if you like, the highest global greenhouse gas emissions in producing rare earths is trying to dissolve up the rare earth minerals themselves is in a complex, heat-needing, often chemical process, and then separating out the rare earths is a much bigger contributor to the greenhouse gas emissions of producing rare earths. So you can begin to quantify it like that, and the Rare Earth Industry Association are doing a responsible sourcing scheme by actually incorporating life cycle assessment, and then that can be linked up to what manufacturers need for them to make their circular economy models. And it's not just when the mine is running that you can do this LCA. I think this is really important. By the time you've built the mine and spent multi-millions of dollars, it's a bit late to wring your hands and think, oh dear, that's a pretty carbon-intensive operation. Okay? But as soon as there is a pre-feasibility study, then you can begin to apply these life cycle assessment techniques. So this is now a technique for exploration. You design out your pollution and waste a la circular economy before you ever get near putting contractors in to build a mine. And this graph is one maybe for the geologists, quite complicated, but this is inverse grade. So the lowest grade, it plots the black line is high, and this is the global warming potential. Basically says the lower grade will have higher carbon, if you like, higher global warming potential, but this is plotted through the whole 45-year projected life of mine. And you can take that further, so another one for the specialists. When you make block models to define how you're going to mine, not only can you put the economics in over here, but you can do the same with an LCA approach linked to your block model software and look at the environmental footprint as you mine. So you could plan your mine in a different way to keep below a different carbon ceiling, for example, or any other environmental parameter that you wanted to get out of your LCA. Okay, so quite sophisticated ways that I think we'll see this being used in the future. How about this one then, regenerating natural systems? That was one of those 3 Ellen MacArthur points there, and you might think that's the left-hand side of the butterfly. I think that's why it was made, but let's pinch that anyway for our view from the front. And of course, we're used to thinking about around mine sites. How do you protect the biodiversity? How do you look after the environment there? And this is an example from a gold mine in Namibia, where they've got a safari park and a big rewilding scheme all around. And so absolutely, in taking some material out of their gold mine, they're using all the land around to regenerate natural systems. And so you can incorporate that part of circular economy into good mine planning and mining practice. So we'll tick that one off. And I think that circular economy thinking then leads us to a more integrated approach to exploration. And this is something that's a piece of research in progress in our Metfotech project. And we're looking at Cornwall in the UK, but it could be anywhere, so I haven't tried to locate this particularly. But here is a scheme where there's not just one mine, there's 11 actual exploration projects in this region for different metals and for geothermal energy. And we think normally about one mine and what's going to happen. Well, let's join them all up and look at the whole mining ecosystem. What about the old waste sites that are there from previous mining? If there's new mining, of course, you have better possibilities to process those as well. There's geothermal power plants. That gives you clean energy, gives you metal byproducts potentially as well. And we really need to get all of those into one systems thinking, a mine ecology, if you like, for that region. Byproducts from one mine may well have much better chance of being processed and can be taken to another. And if you have enough production, then maybe you can get your smelter in this case in Cornwall for tin, for example, because then you can also take part in recycling. Whereas you can't get into that circular economy loop if you're only digging and shipping. So mining, linking up with processing, I think is a really important part if we want to bring that view from the front really into the integrated circular economy. Okay. I hope that makes some sense. I see lots of puzzled faces, but there we are, integrated approaches. Just look at all the different exploration projects and mines in an area and see how they can work together. I think that's the message from that. That's our circular economy message that we're learning from this piece. And so I think this leads to what I like to call two views of sustainability in mining then. And this number one here is all about what happens around the mine. So that's everything I've just been talking about up until now. And we all worry about social license, whether the mine's going to be a good neighbour. What about setting up supply chains? Are we going to abide by the legislation? Are we going to do what our investors want us to do? And that's all in circle number one. And to mine well, I think you have to turn your geological natural capital into human infrastructure and environmental and infrastructure, buildings and so on, capital for the people around. But that's just one view, because really circular economy immediately takes you into view number two, which is the fact that the metals that you've produced, they are very often really some of the most super sustainable materials that you can have. And they provide a service then right out of the mine and along into the value chain, which could be the, if you imagine a cross-section, then you've got your 3D eyes on. This could be the Ellen MacArthur right-hand side of the butterfly here, all through the manufacturing chain, all through your feedback, use and reuse loops, through consumers and back. And metals can have a very long life. So although the mine will be exhausted, we discussed sustainability yesterday, your materials are not. They are really good sustainable materials. And so how do the miners take part in this? This is a very powerful position. Without this mining and processing, you won't get that manufacturing. There's some people here from China, and China is the example of the super successful country who remembered about basic manufacturing. Didn't think we had to do all this really basic clever stuff that I think maybe in Europe we thought that was it. We didn't have to worry about the original heavy industry anymore. But this gives China huge power over inviting manufacturers to come and do their work in China. But once you've got these metals, what about if you didn't sell them? What about if you leased them out? Because then you can really control what happens to them and give them the best chance of a long life. I'd be interested to know if anyone knows of an example when a mining company is doing that. Because I asked one of the local exploration projects near where I am in Cornwall, what about leasing out tin then, and then more of it would be recycled? I would say it took them at least 0.1 seconds to say absolutely no chance. You've got to be kidding, because our investors expect some profit and they're not going to want a long-term lease of these materials. But this is really interesting to think who along this chain should own the metals to give them their longest life, and what is the role of the mining companies. And I think you'll see more mining companies come into this. You'll see words like material stewardship. You control, when you're selling that metal, are you going to control it to someone who will look after it, or somebody who may not or won't? Okay. People like Rio Tinto, this is not a tech metal, but it's the only good example I could find. They have a nice take-back scheme, and so you'll begin to see this. So they don't want to keep ownership of the aluminium, but the company that has it, that uses it, they will take their scrap and recycle it for them, and they'll set that up. So they're really taking part in circular economy loops and mechanisms without actually retaining the ownership. And I think it's very interesting to see who will own metals. Right. So let's look at this slightly different view then of who owns metals. Who's got the metals in the ground? This is global rare earth resources then, so this is definitely a view from the front. So China dominates the production of rare earth minerals, and all the products, all the rare earth value chain is very much dominated by China, who got way ahead of everybody else in this. But you'll see by the coloured spots all over that map that there are loads of rare earth deposits in the world that could be potentially mined. Right, so that's the story. They're not so rare. Somebody said that already yesterday, I remember. Right. But now let's just home in on where I live and where Metfotech's supposed to be doing its work in the UK. And if we just go in a bit more, you see in terms of rare earth deposits, we're not particularly well geologically endowed. Right? Sorry for, there's no Ireland on here. That's a very UK map. Apologies for that. Maybe, I don't think Ireland would do much better than we do in this. However, Ireland would be the same as the UK in the next thing, because, so maybe there's not rare earths under our feet. But there are rare earths all over the place already in use here. And if I made this more sophisticated, my little dots here could just be a measure of population density across the UK. So there's rare earths in these computers, there's rare earths in our lights, there's rare earths in every smartphone that you've got. There's rare earths in all the electric cars that are around the campus here. There's rare earths there are a few places that manufacture rare earth alloys, and there's concentration. So our best ore deposits, folks, you can start to think it's probably not in our smartphones because there's such small amounts of rare earths. They're low-grade deposits. But there are nice high-grade deposits where people are manufacturing, where people are going to be recycling rare earth magnets. So rare earth neodymium iron boron magnets, they're the most powerful magnets you can get. There's the chemical formula. They turn up making the permanent magnet motors in electric cars. And then you start to get big, kilograms of rare earths. And they turn up as tons of rare earths in offshore wind turbines. So any country that is now deploying offshore wind, they are in process of an anthropogenic, geological, if you like, quotes, process of making rare earth deposits offshore from their country. And that's what we need to measure and keep an eye on, because that's, the UK, it needs to have companies going out looking abroad, and there are UK companies exploring in Africa for rare earth deposits, for example. We don't have them geologically here, but we do have them now in our products. So if you go to offshore wind turbines and you look at a field like the Hornsea Project 1, which was the world's biggest offshore wind farm when it was started last year, if you took that and decommissioned it, say in 30 years' time, they're out there for long lives, but if you took it all away in 1 year, then I reckon if you transfer the amount of neodymium into a rare earth equivalent and plot it together with the United States Geological Survey, tonnages of rare earths produced in 2021, then it's actually pretty much equivalent to what Russia produced or the mineral sands that come from Madagascar and India. So this is quite a sizable production of rare earths. If you look by 2030 already, that might be coming off in, say, 30 years' time, there's a reserve created of rare earths here, which is about similar order of magnitude to Canada, nothing like what's being found already in China and the US, but something worthwhile here. And of course, this grade, instead of having a percent or so neodymium, is 27% neodymium in a magnet, and it's 100% magnet, of course. So if you can recycle magnet to magnet, then that's great. Unfortunately, game we were playing last night at dinner, we don't really know exactly the ingredients of this, so it still needs some geochemistry and some geological work often, because people keep secret how much heavy rare earths they dope their magnets with. So there we are. So that view from the front then is looking at recycling in the future, but using our geology skills to work out what the resource is and what we'll need to do with it. And so this is very much applying then geology to looking at secondary materials. And there's lots of our skills, I think, that are completely new to other people in business or materials. They don't think in the same way that we're used to doing in geology at all. I just want to finish off then with this run through and hopefully persuade you not always to use this really pretty diagram that I used to be totally in love with, which comes from the EIT raw materials kick. And it's a techno view, I think, of the circular economy. And of course, it's not the virtuous green circle. It remembers to bring in materials and then take them round and have some waste. But when I use this in Metfotech, and we were immediately told off by our business colleagues, Marcus in his posh suit in the photo, which he doesn't always wear. But he said, right, this condenses all of the high-value part of the Ellen MacArthur diagram into one tiny part of this techno view of the circular economy. And I can just show you some slightly more complicated diagrams to finish off. So then when we were doing it for real, trying to look at, so what is that rare earth value chain in the UK where we have these magnets coming in and being used in cars? We're looking mainly at cars in the UK. And they're coming mainly in from China. It's one alloy producer in the UK and some motor manufacturers in Europe. But this is actually the chain. So we haven't made this circle yet. This is the linear value chain of manufacturing, going all through components, products, and then distribution and use. And then if you're a circular economy business practitioner, you create one of these rather complicated looking diagrams, but these are the feedback loops, as they call them. These are the circles on that Ellen MacArthur butterfly. So if we made it look pretty, we could do it with circles. But it's actually more complicated than just the conceptual butterfly. And there are all kinds of, everywhere you are in that value chain, you can have a feedback loop. And some of those are techno ones, some of them are geological problems here. So every red is a pain point where we're not doing things very well, and we could have research interventions, we should have interventions, so we can do it better. And some of them, like the balance problem, that we end up with loads more cerium and lanthanum than neodymium, so the deposits aren't as economic as they might be, that relates to us at the front. But I wanted to make the point here that some of them are technical. Here's some technical recycling problems, but a lot of them are really business problems as well. So you can't take a single view of the circular economy. You can't just take that techno view, so I won't be using that pretty diagram from the KIC anymore. You really need to take an integrated, multidisciplinary view of the circular economy. And so here's the last slide then. So I think there's a lot of opportunity to take that view from the front in different ways, to integrate primary raw materials into circular economy research. Absolutely, circular economy applies to mining. Don't let anyone leave you stranded on the outside of the circular economy. Joining up that value chain is not easy, but it's absolutely key that we come out of our comfort zones and help do that. And even we have lessons from our primary raw materials side that are absolutely relevant to looking at the secondary raw materials and the value chains that we need. Thank you very much, everybody.